watch this before visiting Key West, Florida. Key West, Florida is one of the best places I've ever visited. It's super entertaining, super beautiful, basically has everything that you would imagine Florida to be. And there are some certain things you should be aware of before you go. First of all, if you are a fishing enthusiast, you're gonna have a great time. So, pretty much as soon as you enter the Florida Keys and all the way down to Key West, there are fishing charters everywhere. And there's different kinds. Some go all the way out to the deep sea, for those types of fish. Others are more around the reefs and that sort of thing. But pretty much anyone who has any remote interest in fishing is going to have a really good time. Even if you're new to fishing or if you're, an experienced veteran, they pretty much have everything for anyone along that skill range. And of course, the Florida Keys in general have a wide variety of different fish species, rarities, things like that. So it is just a pretty enjoyable time overall. Now, if you're not interested in fishing, you could still enjoy your time on the water in other ways, specifically taking a ferry to Dry Tortugas. Dry Tortugas is a national park that is quite a ways off of the coast of Key West. It is also a very historical kind of landmark where it has a very massive brick fortress left over from the Civil War. It also has a large number of shipwrecks in the surrounding coral reefs. Now, taking the ferry to that national park is pretty expensive, but if you don't really care about the price, you really want to see Dry Tortugas, it is a great ferry to take, very scenic. You really get to enjoy that bright blue water surrounding Key West. And of course, you get to see one of the national parks that is really not visited that often, mainly because of its remoteness. But it is a very striking thing to see if you are in the area. And really, the only way to get there is by taking the ferry from Key West, or unless you have your own boat to go there. But again, for most people, the ferry is the main option. Now, the next thing to consider, of course, is the food at Key West. Pretty much everything I ate on that island was absolutely delicious. And it's just unbeatable. Now, one of the local kind of signature dishes is the conch, which is a type of shellfish, basically. There's conch soup, which is kind of similar to clam chowder, but usually red. And there's also fried conch and things like that. So if you're interested in trying some of the local cuisine, definitely try conch. If you're not interested in that, of course, you could do a lot of other culinary explorations. One of my favorite things to eat was Cuban sandwiches from a place called Sandy's. It was a very affordable place, and also basically had the most delicious Cuban sandwiches I have ever eaten in my entire life. Filling, delicious, flavorful, just not dry at all. It basically had all the ups that you could want from a Cuban sandwich, and they had other things as well. Another place that I really enjoyed was Harpoon Harry's, which was kind of more of a casual, kind of almost a diner sort of style place. Really, really delicious food as well. I really enjoyed their fried green beans, which were surprisingly good. I didn't even expect them to be that good, but they were. But there are so many restaurants on Key West that you basically cannot get bored of eating while you're there. Duval Street is known for having the most restaurants, really, pretty much on the whole island. Now, despite Duval Street, it's also a good idea to explore the surrounding streets because they also usually have a wide variety of really, really good restaurants as well. Now, another thing to consider is that if you're a history buff, you're going to have an absolute blast going to Key West because just about everything is highly historical. From what I saw, almost all of the residential houses were very, very old and had some sort of historical significance. A lot of them had signs on the outside talking about, this very important figure lived here, or this building was used for this 100 years ago. Almost all the houses are at least 100 years old, and they have that very specific either Bahama or French colonial architecture, which is very, very unique to the area. And really, if you like architecture as well, you're going to also have a blast because all the buildings are just absolutely beautiful. They're usually painted in pastel colors, and just, they all look very unique. Some of them have something called gingerbreading, which is a type of design carved into the balconies, really. And some of the designs even kind of pointed towards who lived in the house at the time. One that sticks out to me is the gingerbread design of a ship's wheel, which indicated that a ship captain once lived in the house. But in general, again, Key West is kind of a history buff's paradise, and then you have things, like the lighthouse, the Hemingway house, and really just things like that to explore. So if you are into history or even architecture in general, you're gonna have a huge blast just going to Key West, walking around, and just taking in the sights. Now, the last thing to consider is transportation. A lot of people have the misconception that they could just drive into Key West, find a parking spot, and hang out. But that is not really the case, because there is paid parking and there's free parking. Paid parking is very, very expensive, especially if you're going to stay there long term. Free parking is very, very hard to find. Then there's residential parking, and if you park there without being a resident, you will be towed away, which will not be great for your vacation. So driving into Key West is not ideal. It's really best to see if you could get another mode of transportation to the island. If you cannot do that, then you will have to kind of drive around until you find a parking spot that's not going to get you towed away, or cost you your whole wallet. But despite that, once you arrive in Key West, you might be wondering how to get around. You could use your car, but I would not recommend that, especially not in Old Town, where they have very narrow streets, which are also very crowded with people, and also they're cobblestone, so they're kind of rough and just unpleasant to drive over. Really, one of the best modes of transportation is to rent a bicycle and just go around, or walk, where you could really take in the sights, take your time, that sort of thing. There's also a free bus loop on Duval Street that is air conditioned, takes you around, it's free. Or if you want to pay and learn more about the area and its history, you could take the Conch train. I took that. It was very, very enjoyable. The train driver, the trolley driver, basically talked about all the sites that we passed, and I learned quite a lot about the history of the island by doing that. It is kind of expensive, but it is definitely enjoyable if you want to learn more about the history while being kind of shuttled through the entire island. But again, just keep in mind these different transportation options so you're not super stressed trying to white knuckle it behind your car. But that is pretty much all the tips I have for this video. If you found this helpful, then of course leave a like, maybe subscribe, and I make these sort of videos throughout the week, so don't forget about those.